In our last video, we talked about the gear that I use to make my YouTube videos, and several of you asked for the same thing, but for the gear that I use in my professional work. There's a lot of overlap, but there are some differences. But first, what do I do for work outside of making these YouTube videos? So this is actually just something I do on the weekends and the evenings. For my day job, I am a director of education video at a company called Webflow. My team makes the education videos for Webflow, so teaching people how to use Webflow. And you'll find this work over at Webflow University. So if you go to university.webflow.com, all the videos you see there, my team and I make. Secondly, a few times a year, I do location sound work. I'm the sound person on a set for either a commercial piece, a corporate piece, or a short passion project, short film type thing. These are usually 1 or 2 days at most, and actually some of them are long production days. I've had some that were 14, 16 hours, but for most of them, they're pretty short, maybe 4 to 6 hours. So my professional work falls into 3 categories. Number 1, the recordings we do in the studio for Webflow. Number 2, the voiceovers we do for Webflow. And number 3, the location sound jobs that I do as passion projects or for hire for a commercial or corporate piece. In the studio, most of our production work is done at an in-house studio at the company headquarters. The studio has 3 permanent positions, an education desk plus 2 additional tables, so we can record 3 positions at the same time. And we also have space for additional ad hoc positions, so if we need a 4th position, we do have enough space in the studio to set that up, but that's not permanently set up. In each case, we use a Sennheiser MKH50 as the boom microphone, so for those 3 positions I talked about earlier, they all have a permanently boomed MKH50 above that position, and that's the primary mic we use for each of those. We also have a Schoeps CMC 641, although we rarely pull it out. I find that's better for people who have kind of darker voices, not a lot of sibilants, and maybe some people have like a really dry, I would describe as a dry voice where there's not a lot of higher frequency in it, and so it can be hard to hear sometimes and kind of articulate. So that Schoeps does a nice job of bringing out some of those higher frequencies as well. Our main recorder and mixer is the Sound Devices 833. And yes, it's actually a field mixer, but we love it for a number of reasons. Number 1, it has all the inputs and outputs that we need. And we do route the audio into the 833 and then also route it out into some Atomos recorders. So we're usually capturing to the Atomos recorders, and then we're also combining that with the audio from the 833 at the same time. We love the 833, again, for all of the numbers. It has the outputs and the inputs that we need. It also has a lot of flexibility in terms of routing. It's basically like a full-on digital mixing board in a tiny little package. So you've got EQ, you've got compressors, although I'll be honest, we don't normally use those that much, and usually our routing is pretty simple. But the one feature that is probably the main reason we bought it originally is that it has Dugan Auto Mix. So if we're recording all 3 positions, or maybe even in some cases 4 positions at the same time, we can use that auto mix to while we're recording, to make an automatic mix that is almost always usable in post-production. So we don't have to do a lot more mixing. Now, if you've never recorded more than 1 person in the same space, each on their own microphone at the same time, you don't realize how much work that is. So the auto mix saves a lot of hours in post-production and is an invaluable tool for us. So yeah, why did we spend, when we bought it, I think it was closer to $4,000. Why did we spend all that money? The auto mix in and of itself has paid off that mixer. There's no reason it was a good choice, in other words. There is also sometimes some noise that comes from our downstairs neighbor. We're based in San Francisco, and there's a retailer downstairs that turns on music during their workday. And so sometimes we have to put additional sound blankets on the floor to help dampen the sound coming from the neighbor downstairs. All of our cameras are Canon C70s. There's some more overlap there. And we're using just native Canon RF glass on all of them. I think in most cases, 24 to 70, we have a 50 1.2, I think. But most of them, I think, are 24 to 70 is the main thing. All of our lighting is permanently attached to the ceiling, and it consists of approximately 45 small LED panels from a company called Neewer, Neewer. LED panels with surprisingly good color quality. The lighting design is pretty simple. It's kind of just a big wash of light in the whole space. And they're fanless. They don't have fans, so they don't contribute noise to the studio space, which was really, really important to us as well. Okay, so that's the studio when we're doing voiceover. So not all of us live in San Francisco. So sometimes we need to do recordings of just voiceover, and we can do that from home. So both Greamer and myself do that. For Greamer, we have a portable sound booth from a company called Vocal Booth To Go, same company that makes these sound blankets that I've used and love. And so essentially it's a frame that's 4x4, and then you can drape all the sound blankets are kind of made to drape over it. And that works pretty nicely. And we actually just recently bought some flooring as well for that booth because he has a hard floor that he's got that set on. So that's working pretty nicely for us. Greamer records his voiceovers currently with a Shure SM7B, but we're not totally thrilled with that sound for voiceover, so we're in the process of getting him an MKH50 from Sennheiser as well. We know that works well on his voice, and so that's one we're getting for that vocal recording booth as well. His recorder is a Zoom F8N. That's not the Pro version, the old version. And yes, he records in 24-bit, and no, we don't have any problems with it. You can actually make recordings, especially dialogue, without 32-bit float, whether people believe it or not. And it does a nice job. Works well for him. I record my voiceovers mainly in this space here. Again, I have several sound blankets, one here, another one there, one on the table in front of me. And so this is a pretty good space for recording dialogue recordings without a lot of noise. So that works well. I don't even have this lighting on normally when I do my voiceover, so that's even less sound because that light, which is over there, bouncing off of here, key light onto me, does have a fan in it. Sometimes when it's really cold, because this is an unfinished basement and unheated basement, I go into my office, and in my office, I have, in addition to all the broadband acoustic traps that I have positioned in my office, I also bring in a GIK Acoustics portable isolation booth, which gives me a little bit more isolation and ensures that we get a kind of a really dry recording, which is important. I record with a variety of microphones. I would say my primary is the Rode NT1 4th generation, and I usually record. Sometimes I use other microphones. I have used the Rode NTR a little bit recently. That's a ribbon microphone. A little bit exotic from the standpoint that it does have a polar pattern that's a little bit unusual. It picks up equally on the front and the back of the microphone. That's a big part of the reason, for example, that I use that portable isolation booth. And then finally, I use the JZ Microphones V11. It has a more vintage sound, not quite as sparkly on the top end, which is good because my voice tends to be, sorry about that, just got a text, and I have my computer in front of me with notes. The V11 is a really nice fit for my voice if I'm doing just voiceover. However, if there's music behind the voiceover, the V11's sounds a little dull because it's competing with the music and there's not as much of the higher end articulation. So usually when I'm doing that, a lesson I learned from the last piece that we did a couple of months ago is that I would generally reach for the NT1 instead, which has a little bit more high frequency presence to it, I would say. And then all of those I record into my Sound Devices Mix Pre 3, just like we're doing here today. So that's the studio, that's the voiceover. Next up, location sound. When I do location sound, the heart of my sound bag is a Sound Devices 888 mixer recorder. And what can I say, but it sounds amazing. It's basically the big brother of the 833. It has more inputs and more outputs. It also has Dante capability, though I haven't used that a whole lot. But the big things for me are the routing flexibility, so I can set up comms if I need to. I can set up a wireless feed to a director or producer. And another huge thing is that it has an integration with the Sound Devices SL2 wireless unit. So I can attach a slot unit, which is also basically a antenna distribution system, RF distribution system, to the 888 itself. So that makes it very, very compact for all the things I'm doing with it. So that is called the SL2. That's the slot system. It's attached to the 888. It has two A20 receivers, Sound Devices A20 receivers in it. So it brings in a total of 4 channels of wireless audio directly into the 888 in digital form. So the beautiful thing about that is that with the Sound Devices wireless system, we are capturing the audio with the lavalier microphone and the transmitter pack on the Talent. It captures the audio, digitizes it, and then sends it to the receiver, and it's digital all the way through to the recorder from there. So we're not going through multiple stages of analog input, convert to digital, send wirelessly, convert digital back to analog, send that into the recorder, then convert it back to digital. Instead, it's just cleaner. It's just a better way to work if you can. So that's a really nice thing. Now, in addition to that, the SL2, as I mentioned before, is essentially also has a built-in RF distribution system, meaning I can attach 2 external antennas to it, and it will feed those antennas into all 4 of the channels of wireless. So we have the A20 receivers, of course, are true diversity wireless microphone systems. And so what I do is I feed the 2 different feeds from my external antenna, which is an RF venue diversity antenna. So it is a fin style log periodic dipole array, plus at 90 degrees, it has another dipole antenna. So we also got that on a mast, and I can raise that up to about 10 feet, feed both of those into the SL2, and then distribute those to the 2 different receivers and all 4 channels. So that works really beautifully. I can get very nice range. I have never had a problem with dropouts working in most circumstances. I'm not usually doing super challenging things as far as RF is concerned, and I live in the kind of the Salt Lake metro area, or outside of Salt Lake metro area, but most of the work is in that area, and our RF is not horrible. It's not like New York or Manhattan or something like that. So not too bad. I use 4 Sound Devices A10 transmitters along with an A20 Mini. And the A20 Mini is really kind of a special use case for me. I know it has some additional features. It has the gain forward feature, which means that you're actually setting the gain on the mixer on the 888 instead of on the transmitter pack, which is really nice. But it's really small, and it runs through batteries pretty quickly. So for longer ones, unless I need to really hide the transmitter pack on tight-fitting clothing, then I just use one of the A10 transmitters instead. All of this is housed in the Orca OR34 sound bag, and I usually keep it on a cart, and my cart is the Sound Cart Mini. We did a kind of a walkthrough of the entire cart about a year ago, so you can take a look at that if you're interested over on our channel. As far as battery distribution system, we're using a PSC triple play. It has 3 different power inputs, which is really nice. So I can feed 2 smart batteries plus my big 1,000 watt-hour lithium polymer battery made by D&O Lighting. Sadly, they don't make that battery anymore, but it's fantastic because it sits on the bottom shelf of my cart, provides some ballast for the cart, and it will power the cart pretty much all day. So it is really nice to not have to worry about powering everything with the smart batteries, because I'll be honest, the 888 is pretty power hungry, so it's nice to have that. My primary boom mics are the DPA 4017B as a shotgun microphone, and typically when I'm using that outdoors, I will have that in the Rycote Nano Shield, or if it's really, really windy, in the Rycote Cyclone as my wind protection. My primary indoor boom mic is the Sennheiser MKH 8050, or for interviews, usually that I statically boom that one typically nowadays. The MKH50 works a little bit better on a boom pole when you're moving things around. It seems a little bit more immune to transferring mechanical noise, and so I get cleaner recordings with it. So those are some of my thoughts. I do also have a Schoeps CMC 641. Don't pull that out a lot unless I'm doing like a 3-person interview. And again, I try to match the Schoeps to someone who has sort of a darker voice, because it tends to be a little bit shrill if anyone has any sort of sibilance. And so I almost never use that mic on my own voice. But anyway, those are my primary mics. As far as lavalier microphones, my primary mics are the Shure TL48 and the TL47, which to me just sound fantastic. I'm really happy with those mics. And the TL47s, you can put different caps on them to kind of tune sculpt the sound a little bit. So if you have to bury it a little bit more, you want a crisper sound, you can put the cap on for that. My boom poles are the Ambient QP Slim Carbon Fiber pole as of this year. Earlier this year, I got that to do for a review. It's a fantastic pole. I really love that one. And then I also have a couple of K-Tech Avalon graphite poles, which are also good. It's nice to have the 3 poles now, because if I am doing an interview with multiple people, now I have plenty of boom poles to make that work. I always, on the location sound jobs, almost always bring C-stands with boom pole hooks so that I can statically boom the mics when we need to do that. I bring a series of sound blankets to manage any noise on set. And one last thing, I always have a Leatherman tool with me when I'm on set because that's really useful. Also a flashlight, also very useful. So those are kind of the main things that I do. So hopefully that's of some use to you. It's sort of a maybe belly button gazing at some level, but it's also helpful to understand what different people are using for their work. In the end, of course, as I said before, focus on the story that you're trying to tell. It is so important to me to never lose focus of that's what we're here to do when we're making these recordings. Buy the gear that you need, but obsess over the story and obsess over making a really, really good recording that can touch and move people with your education, with your entertainment, or with your art, whatever it is. Never lose perspective on that is the thing I wanted to say. So get out there, make some great sound, and we will talk to you again soon.